Welcome to Off the Record, a legal podcast.
Welcome back to Off the Record, a legal podcast with Rhett Burney, an experienced attorney helping families throughout the upstate of South Carolina with divorce, custody, and estate planning. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we have a special guest, Anna Tarbert, and she's going to be talking about what to consider before saying I do again, from protecting your children and your assets to updating old paperwork that could cause future problems. Rhett, Anna, welcome.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I'll just throw these questions out there. Whoever wants to answer, go for it. When someone remarries after divorce, what are some of the, legal details that often get overlooked while they're, focused on their new marriage and planning a wedding and whatnot?
Kevin, since I've done it before, I'll go first. Having been married and remarried, once you do it again, you need to make sure that you have redone all of your wills. You updated the beneficiaries on your life insurance policies, on your retirement accounts, on your banking accounts. You just have to have a complete and total reset after your first divorce.
Including powers of attorney, healthcare, and durable. Those are a bunch of documents as well that people often overlook or forget that they need to update. They put them in a drawer when they get them done. 5 years later, your ex-wife is still your healthcare power of attorney, and that's probably not the best idea. So we want to make sure that those documents are being updated before you get remarried or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, that medical power of attorney could be a big one for sure.
Yeah, you don't want someone pulling the plug or being able to pull the plug. You don't want them to.
Pull the plug. He just has a broken wrist.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you're paying them alimony, they'll let you live forever.
That's very true.
Can't work the other way.
How can remarriage affect other things like custody or support arrangements from a prior divorce?
It's a really great question. One of the biggest things we want people to take into consideration is their alimony. So if a spouse is receiving alimony and they get remarried, that will terminate their alimony payments. So if you're receiving a large sum of money each month, you might want to hold off on getting remarried because the second you do, that alimony terminates.
Oh, okay.
So that's one thing that people tend to overlook.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be something that people wouldn't necessarily think about. But, is that something does that come back to bite people a lot of times?
A lot of times it does, because once alimony is terminated, you can't come back and get it again later. So once you have remarried and that alimony payment is terminated, it's null and void. You're not getting it back. So even if you get divorced again from your second spouse, you can't go back to the first and say, well, I'm divorced now, I want that money back. No, it's long gone.
Yeah, Kevin, we've had people that have made a bad decision and thought that new marriage was going to change everything, only to find out a few months in that it's not that great. Not only have they lost the second marriage, they've lost the alimony from the first. So they've got to be careful about that type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned a few things from an estate planning standpoint before, but what else should people review or update before they get remarried, particularly if they already have children from the previous marriage?
Yeah. So that's usually when we get into a trust situation. Because what can happen if both spouses have children and they just do a will saying that they want their spouse to get everything, and then they want their two children from the old relationship to get something, and the two children from their new spouse to get something. Well, if that person dies first, then the surviving spouse can then go change the will and give all of the assets to their children and leave out the person who has now died children. So that's usually a great time to do a trust to make sure that you have protected your side of the family, so to speak, in case a divorce or death does occur. So usually when we have the blended family type situations, that's really when we start advocating a trust document rather than just a simple will.
Absolutely. It allows for protection extended to both sides of the family and their children. So that way, if one spouse dies, the other one can't write out their stepchildren out of the will. So it protects those assets to pass to who the people actually want it to pass to.
Do you find that a lot of people just assume that a new marriage automatically changes who inherits what?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people just make assumptions regarding, okay, well, I'm married now, so she'll get everything, but if I die, she'll make sure my children are taken care of. one thing I've learned in this business is you can't assume anything.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to prenups, postnups, Rhett and I have talked about this before, but they're always touchy subjects. How do you broach that subject? It can be tricky. Do you help couples approach these conversations in a healthy way?
I like to think so. One of the things that I take a lot of pride in is making sure that if one of my clients is being served with a prenup, that they're not being absolutely screwed, for a lack of a better way to say it, when it
Mhm.
comes down to what that prenup is going to outline for them. And if it is, then they need to be made well aware of that, because some of the things that people get so caught up in when they're in love and they're getting married is, oh, we'll be together forever. And yes, that's a great thought, and we hope that for you. But you always have to have protection on the back end in the event that that marriage is not a happy one.
Yeah, and that's a good time, when you're doing a prenup, if you're leaving a marriage where you were receiving alimony, obviously the new marriage cancels that out. You might want to look at how to protect yourself in this new marriage so that if it only lasts for a short period of time, you have a little bit more financial gain than you would regularly have if you weren't giving up alimony from a previous marriage.
Absolutely. It's a little extra set of protection for you for giving up one lump sum payment a month to build in some security on the back end with your new marriage as well.
I would imagine people getting remarried probably have an easier conversation with prenups. Is that fair to say?
It depends. It
Yeah.
depends on whose, second marriage it is versus whose first marriage it is.
Yeah.
We get all ages, we really do. You know, it. I know the people's hesitancy is that it sends a bad message that the marriage
Sure.
we're looking at a marriage is
You're already planning for it to end.
yeah. So you have to get over that psychological aspect of it in the new marriage. Second marriages, third marriages, especially when people are now running their own businesses or they've gone on and started making their own money. They're a little more apt to understand the necessity of a prenup, but we happen to do them for every stage of a person's relationship, whether it's their first marriage or fourth marriage. But it does sell a little bit better for those who have been through the process or a bad divorce to go ahead and sign up for a prenup.
Absolutely. Or even just people who are later on in life before they get married. Those
Yeah.
people have been established themselves.
Yeah, and then with postnups, those are documents that are done after the marriage has already occurred. And a lot of times we'll see those conversations start where people have already started the divorce process and they try to reconcile or they're hoping to reconcile. But in the event that they're not able to make that divorce work, we usually see them come into the office at that time and set out the postnup, which is like a prenup. It's just done after the marriage has already occurred.
And you asked about awkwardness, Kevin. Truthfully, I think that postnups can be slightly more awkward and uncomfortable because they tend to be followed by an issue that has already happened in the
Right.
marriage. So we have to be more careful around those conversations, I think, than we do the prenup.
That makes sense. I could totally see that. You mentioned a couple times about how once you get remarried, the alimony, if you're paying alimony, that's to your previous spouse, it stops. Is that something that automatically stops, or do you have to go back to court to make that happen?
It automatically stops legally. Now, we're not going to sit here and tell you that there are occasions where people get remarried and they just don't happen to tell the other spouse. That happens oftentimes. So you may have to go back and bring a case against someone who is remarried in order to recoup what you have paid during that period of time of their remarriage. And that happens quite often.
Quite often, more than you would think, unfortunately. And that's what we would file an action for because you have overpaid at that point. So you would be looking for reimbursement of your overpayment due to someone's forgetfulness to tell you that they got
Forgetfulness,
remarried.
yes. I mean, things slip your minds all the time. You forget to grab something at the store. You forget to tell someone you got remarried. I mean, it happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, why wouldn't you send your ex-spouse an invitation to your wedding?
Didn't quite make the guest list, I guess.
What about if not a technical marriage, but like let's say someone's paying alimony to their ex-wife, and the ex-wife moves in with a new man, and they're basically their partnership, but they're not married. Do still get the alimony? Are there technicalities there?
There are rules around that. So if they live together for more than 90 days, then in theory, the alimony should terminate. But again, the truthfulness behind that comes into play where you might have to file an action to address it.
Right.
But legally, once you've been residing with someone that you're in a romantic relationship with for over 90 days, your alimony does terminate.
And it's a hard thing to prove because
Mhm.
it has to be 90 consecutive days for the most part, exceptions here and there. But it's very difficult to be able to prove that. We've had cases before where we have had to hire PIs sit outside someone's residence for 90 days or more
Mhm.
in order to document that the people are living together.
Wow, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm honestly not surprised that people would do that. But I mean, I suppose certain situations would be pretty easy if it's like, oh, drop the kids here now because here's where I live. Then you can be like, oh, okay, well, now I'm not paying you alimony anymore. But yeah, if it's a little shadier or a little bit less cut and dry, I could see that. Mhm. When two families are blending, what are some practical steps that parents can take to make sure that everyone's protected, both legally and perhaps emotionally?
Whoa, that's an episode in and of itself, Kevin.
I believe it.
There's so many dynamics when you're bringing families together with children. If it's just a man and a woman, that's a little bit easier. But when you start bringing in children and start bringing in different age children, and then you have the financial aspect of it. I'm a big proponent of counseling,
Mhm.
especially at the outset. I think the rules need to be established within the household of how children will be disciplined, how we're going to treat them, where they're going to sleep, all of that. Because as soon as you start blending children that have never known each other, into a family dynamic, it just becomes something that can be very, very difficult. And it's not unusual that because of the issues that arise in trying to blend two families with children, we see those families end up through another divorce situation because
Mhm.
they have not thought about what the reality of life is going to look like once they bring families in, children in, because there's probably another parent on the other side and they're having to work out visitation and those sorts of things. And, it is tough. And Kevin, you're a parent. It's tough just raising a child within a home where the parents are married. So,
Yep.
take that and add a couple more children in different marriages or from different relationships, and it's exponentially harder. So, what I would tell people who are thinking about doing that, they need to sit down and have a real hard conversation because it is not going to be easy. They need to go ahead and assume that. What are you going to do when the children don't like each other? How are you
Mhm.
going to punish them? How are you going to treat them? Um, those types of things. So because it can easily go south with those types of situations.
Not every family ends up like the Brady Bunch.
Not every family ends up like the Brady Bunch. I'd counseled a couple not too long ago, and they were having some issues with the child going over to the other parent's house, and they were hearing some things about what was going on in the house. They wanted to bring a new case, and I told them, I said, I think probably you need to go approach that parent and talk about the issues that they were having because one, they may not know. And two, if you do file an action to address custody or visitation, I think based upon some events that may be happening in another household, I think a family court judge the first question is going to be, well, did you talk to the other parent about
Yeah.
that? So I think transparency is probably the biggest thing that we think
Yeah.
we see judges wanting from people that are parenting and co-parenting. So it's difficult, but I think at the very outset, if two people are getting married and they have children that are close in age and they're going to be merging families and households, they better have that conversation. They probably need to start with co-parenting in the
Mhm.
very beginning and figure out how they're going to do it because I can promise you there are going to be issues that occur that they're just not even going to
Yeah.
fathom coming up.
Absolutely. And I will say a lot of the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis can be resolved if the two parents just have a conversation. But sometimes people get so caught up in the past drama, whether that was from their first divorce or their custody battle, that they don't want to sit down and have these conversations. But I think it's important for everyone to remember you liked each other at one point. You can put your personal differences aside to have a conversation about your kids, because that's what your kids need. So if people can remember that, they would probably be able to handle a decent amount of their problems. But I definitely agree. I'm always a huge advocate for counseling. I never think it hurts.
And that's coming from two people who make money off of people who fight. And so when you hear the people who are saying, hey, cut our throats, go discuss this, go talk about this before you come to us, I think that gives a lot of credence to the advice we're giving today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. What are some of the most common problems that you see when couples don't update their legal documents after remarrying?
My favorite is when they come in years later to update their documents and the new spouse is mad because the husband or the wife still has a will that says everything goes to their ex-spouse. And so that can cause some problems in the new relationship. So that tends to be a pretty funny one when it's been 5, 6, 7 years and they still are leaving everything to their ex-spouse, if you will.
Yeah, or better yet, someone dies and their ex-spouse is the beneficiary of their life insurance policy. Now, we have laws in South Carolina that protect those situations, but it makes it a lot easier if you update it now so you're not having to fight with lawyers for an insurance company or a bank or those sorts of things. But people, they don't think about it.
That's a great point as well. Talking about, leaving beneficiaries, your 401k is a huge one. You designate a beneficiary whenever you start a job. You might work in that job 10, 15, 20 years and never think about it again.
Right.
Something that you need to think about because like Rhett said, while there are laws that protect this new spouse in this state, it's a headache. And it's a lot easier if you just go ahead and update those documents when you do get remarried to reflect who you want those accounts to go to.
Do you recommend, after a divorce in general, should people look at these, or is it really not as much of an issue until it becomes a remarriage thing?
I think it depends on who they want the asset to go to. If you are on great terms with your ex-spouse and you still want them to have your 401k, leave it. But it's probably not a bad idea to take a look at those beneficiaries after a divorce and really put some thought into who should be receiving those upon your death.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why we started our estate planning division in our office, because we handle so many divorces, that it's just natural to want to change a lot of those documents that have been in place for your marriage where you have named a spouse to be the beneficiary of certain accounts. So, we always tell people at the end of a case, a divorce case, that they need to start looking at who their beneficiaries are, because everybody forgets, Kevin. Kevin, I bet you don't have a will yet, do you?
We're in the process of discussing doing it.
It's okay, yes. Kevin. I don't have one either, and my husband yells at me all the time because it's my job.
Okay, see, Rhett, why are you giving me grief?
Well, I know, Kevin, but you're older than Anna, so.
Very true. I deserve all of the grief. Believe me, I know I need to do this, and it is on the list. And I promise you that at some point we will do it. On that note, thank you for joining us on Off the Record, a legal podcast with Rhett Burney of Rhett Burney Law in Simpsonville, South Carolina. To learn more about family law or estate planning questions related to remarriage, visit rhettburney.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We very much appreciate it. Rhett, Anna, awesome having you guys here. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. See you later.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.